What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fanatically Speaking. I'm Kent.
I'm Logoff. I'm the Logoff legend. And we're here to say everything that every fan is thinking, but louder and probably a little crazier. Get ready. This is Fanatically Speaking with Kent and Logoff. You know what's funny? Like, I'm not a social media hater. I'm a social media hater. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want people to think that I get on the internet and start hating people on social media. That's not what I do.
The first half was absolutely horrible. You know, just inept offense, inept defense, special teams, you name it.
I'm going to turn into Oprah. Why were you so angry?
He sucks this season. This game, whatever's going on, right? And the very next pitch, guess what they do? They double homer, and he's like, "Told you, Dad. Why are you always knocking down people?"
You got the highs and the lows.
Yeah, so I do that.
You need the highs and the lows, and
so I do that. Yeah, but
I'm trying to be the voice of reason here.
I am what I am. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Fanatically Speaking. I am Kent, the co-host and promoter.
I'm Logoff, the Logoff legend, the hater of social media. I'm the co-host and producer of the show.
All right, so I got a topic for us today. It's two different sports, two different committees, selection process, whatever you want to call it. But they both hit me because I wanted to ask the question, like, which one is worse? We just recently, the college football playoff selection committee had the big drama the past weekend. Who got in, who's not in, who's out. And obviously there's always an argument on who didn't get in. But I think with the process and the fact that they put out rankings every week leading up to this last week, some of their stuff is head scratchers. And I know they change it every year now because they're trying to find the right way. But it was still it was a head scratcher on some of it. And this is not just because I'm a Notre Dame fan. And then you got the Hall of Fame voting has just began for MLB. It's very early. About 5% of the votes are in with the Baseball Writers Association of America. But then on top of that, they also just had their selection for what they do, the committee, the Contemporary Baseball Era Committee, which they have it's basically a second chance for guys who don't get in on the original Hall of Fame selection vote. They can only be on there 10 years or a max of 10 years. And if they don't get in, then they fall into this committee where they can vote them in. And I just want to hit on both of them because both these committees, I think, have some explaining to do.
Yeah, so the question for me comes down to, when you have a committee, which is essentially a selected group of people who gets to make these decisions for you, everything comes into play. Bias, their professional history, their background, their experiences, their connections, their relationships. All of that comes into play, even when they say that it doesn't. So whether you're talking about college football, a college football playoff, or you're talking about, baseball Hall of Fame inductees, like all the things that involve you being a human being still comes into play as to what your choice is going to be or what selection you're going to make. We could touch on the college football one. It's kind of the hot topic of the day. But the thing with Notre Dame, and obviously the more shocking thing about the Notre Dame being bumped out, was that they had already been ranked, they'd stayed ranked, they didn't play any games, so they didn't lose any games or win any games, but somehow they slipped out of the playoff. Now, me, not even being a college football fan, I would have preferred to see Miami in there anyway, full disclosure, mainly because they did beat Notre Dame early in the year. And I know, and if I'm not mistaken, Notre Dame did start off 0-2, right?
Yeah, they lost to Miami and Texas A&M by a total of 4 points.
Yes. Got it. But still losses.
Still losses, and then went on to went on to win the rest of their games, 10 straight, by an average of 30 points.
Got it. And then so with Notre Dame being up against Miami, the big talk all over was, okay, but they lost to Miami. Miami beat them. How is it that Notre Dame got in? And if you want to say, hey, well, they were on a hot win streak, they caught fire, they're a different team now than they were then, that's fair. But Miami was also a different team too. The losses that they had were against strong competition. Those were close games as well. They didn't get destroyed in any of those games. I think one game they lost by 3, and then the other game they lost in overtime. So it was as neck and neck as it could have been. But I think the big dropping of the ball was the fact that they had Notre Dame ranked and then dropped them for no explainable reason. It's like, if that's the case, just put both of them outside of the top 12. Just put both of them outside of the top 12. It's almost as if they left Notre Dame in there just to keep them talked about, because we all know how popular Notre Dame is. But it didn't make sense to me, even though I was okay with Miami getting in, because I felt like you got to have that head-to-head has to matter. And I understand all the outrage and everything with Notre Dame. I don't like how Notre Dame handled it after. I don't like we're not going to play in the bowl game. And, there's all this anger at the ACC. But the committee, this entire time, it shows a level of inconsistency, which I think is what you're getting to. And I don't know if there's a way for them to fix it. This is a terrible precedent, especially to say that Alabama got their doors blown off and they still let them stay in. And we could debate all day about whether or not I think Alabama's still formidable. I think they'll be okay in the playoff. They'll be able to hold their own. But that ass kicking that they took in the SEC title game against Georgia, and I want to say they had like negative rushing yards in that game. Like, they couldn't do anything. And they negative 3 yards, and they still left them in the game. Like, left them in the playoffs. So it's wonky. There's no perfect measurement system for any of this. And ultimately, what I think this comes down to, Kent, and then I'll give it to you. I think this comes down to the reasons for committees is to have this flexibility and nuances to where college football as a whole gets what they want in terms of which teams play and which teams don't. If you have a set criteria, you can't dictate it. The rules are set, meaning if you have this certain record, if you have these certain wins, if you have this certain strength of schedule, if you win by certain amounts of points, if everything is fixed, not only do the people on the committee not have a job, which means they don't get paid for it, but they also can't cherry pick the teams that they want, because I don't care what anybody says, Alabama was absolutely cherry picked to stay in the playoffs because they're Alabama and because they are such a big draw, and they've been a big draw for the last 10 to 15 years.
And they're in the SEC, and all losses are not equal. At least that's what's said.
I'm not going to give them that. But I think this is, and we can. I'll let you go on the college football thing, and it's the same thing for baseball, where I think it's meant to be. It's meant to be this divisive. It gives us something to talk about. It gives us something to dive into, to question, to be outraged about, for people to cheer. They were popping bottles in Miami when Miami got in, and Notre Dame had their hands on their heads. Like, Notre Dame fans had their hands on their head like, man, I don't believe this. What the hell happened? I think that's the intention. It's to garner the reaction and to get this type of reaction, because now everyone's paying more attention to it than if the teams were set and picked. And it didn't matter who got in, because you would have known anyway.
Yeah, so I think we agree that 2 teams, 4 teams, 12 teams, if they go to 16 teams, there's always probably going to be an argument over who got in, who didn't. As long as there's a selection committee, as long as they're doing this way. I do have a way, and I'm going to give a shout out when I talk about it, that could possibly fix it. But I want to just when you put these resumes against each other, and I think we're really talking about, Miami, Notre Dame, Alabama. Those were the 3 kind of battling for the last spot. BYU was in there, but they lost as well, and then that pretty much kicked them out. So Miami this year, we talk about They beat Notre Dame the very first week by 3. Can't be mad at it. Tough game, went down to the wire. Miami was at home. Home team won. And then you mentioned Notre Dame. They lost the next week. Texas A&M at Notre Dame by 1. The kicker, I forgive me for not remembering exactly. I know they messed up the extra point, right? Missed it. They missed it. So they lost by that 1. That come back and got them. Miami lost this year they lost by 3 to Louisville. They're not ranked. They lost by 6 to SMU. They're not ranked. So their 2 losses were to 2 unranked teams. Okay? Where Notre Dame lost to 2 top teams. Alabama, you mentioned they got blown out in the SEC title game with a horrible performance. But early in the year, they beat Georgia. So they beat one of the top teams, if not, arguably top 2, top 3 team, right?
Yeah, but I think, and not only that was a close game. I think they only beat Georgia.
It was a very close game, but they beat them. So, but as you said, and I know head-to-head matters, but like you said, Miami beat Notre Dame the very first week. You know who else lost the first week of the season? Alabama. You know who they lost to? Florida State.
State, yeah.
So it's like we're not holding them accountable for losing the first week of the season to a trash team. You know what I mean? And they lost to a bad team. So it's kind of a 3-way tie in a way when you look at it. But like you said, it depends on what the committee's looking at. But this is, again, not solely about Notre Dame. It's about the selection, right? Miami didn't even win their conference, and their conference had a championship game. That was between Duke and Virginia. Duke won. They're not in the playoff because they're like, well, yeah, we're not going to let in a 8-5 team. So I don't know if that means if Virginia would have won, then Virginia would have got in. And they let in, however many conference champions, which that's why James Madison, JMU's in, Tulane is in. Okay, so again, this is not solely about Notre Dame. It's about, again, the conferences. We talked about the ACC. And then, like you said, Notre Dame was ranked above Miami, and then Miami jumped them. So the committee, they're letting in someone who didn't even win their conference, and Notre Dame didn't even play. So there's an argument there. And I think Notre Dame hurts themselves for sure by not being in a conference. I can't even defend that. I'm just kind of like, hey, eventually you got to join a conference. And the other thing that's hurt college football is again, everybody joined the ACC, Big 10, Big 12. So they all grew. ACC, it's not regional anymore. So here's the fix real quick. And not that we're trying to get a fix, but again, this committee, again, they didn't make a good decision here, I don't think. And again, they're never going to, not as long as it's like this. So the fix is, again, shout out to Josh, one of our top listeners. He came up and just said, basically, look, go back to regional, or, you got to have, split these teams back up into conferences, and whatever number you want, 12, 8, that's how many conferences you have. Maybe the SEC is 2 conferences split, right they are now, ACC. However you want to do it. And basically, no more conference championships. You play your teams in your conference. You win your conference. You're in the playoff. There is no argument after that. If you can't win your conference, you don't need to be in the playoff. So that's a fix. Not that we're looking for it, but that is a way to get it out of a committee's hands. Just let them settle it on the field, however that works out. But long as they have it like it is now, it will always be messed up. Like I said, there's always going to be an argument of who gets in, who gets out. Again, they're letting in a team who lost 3 games, like Alabama, didn't win their conference, played in the championship, and then Notre Dame, Miami's at home on their couch, and somehow Miami jumps Notre Dame because head-to-head, even though for the last 3 weeks, Notre Dame was ranked above them. And then the committee has a, kind of like a get-out-of-jail-free card because they can say, well, we tell y'all not to pay attention to the rankings. Then why are you putting them out? Then don't put out rankings, right? They,
Well,
you know,
what-
that's
well,
what,
so-
but
so
that's what
that-
they say. So it's like, okay, they can basically say, well, the rankings are what they are, but then we do whatever at the end of the year.
So, and that's the thing, and that's a real good idea by Josh. I like that.
Yeah.
The only downside to it is that works perfectly if you don't care about money.
Yeah.
like if it's just about football and it's just about like winning games and finding out who is the best team in the nation, that works perfectly. But they got all like these conferences, you got to split up money, which is why Notre Dame doesn't belong. I'm sorry, let me take that back. Which is why Notre Dame does belong in ACC, except for their football program, because they understand the money generator that it is, and they want to keep all those dollars to themselves. So they're good enough to be in the ACC when it's good for them, and that's for every other competitive sports team that they have, except for football. They feel like football is their exception, and there's other teams that could benefit from this, joining conferences and getting a chance to compete and actually win a conference and get into a national championship game. But the other side of this is all the bowl games and the money that surrounds that. It like college football is such a huge revenue generator for not only teams but for like television broadcasts as well, because you know that millions of people are going to watch these games live. And I think that's why the committee gets this wrong, is because they're trying to put together the best matchups, the best teams that are going to draw in people. And even with it's if you put Miami in one box and Notre Dame in the other, we know that Notre Dame's a bigger draw.
Yeah.
But with this move, I guarantee you that Miami game is going to shatter records for the amount of people who are going to watch and maybe even hate watch just to see what Miami does. And that contention is, I think, what they were going for. I think they were meant to, the intention was to make this messy so that people are paying more attention. I don't like it. It has destroyed kind of what we expected college sports to be. And we know it's been a dirty game. And we're actually going to get into how dirty college football is a little later too.
Yep.
But it's a headache. There's real players on that roster. There's real people whose jobs are on the line. And I don't like the way Notre Dame reacted. I don't like the way the committee, changed things up at the end. I don't like how Alabama is still in. It's just going to stink. Hopefully this playoff turns out to be fun to watch. That's all I'm really banking on. But it's tough to tell, man. It all just stinks. It makes my head hurt a little bit.
Yes, it does. And like I said, we just want consistency, and we just want, everybody wants to understand it. But like I said, as long as like this, it's always going to be a problem. And just to flip it to what I was talking about earlier is, are they worse? Is this committee worse than the baseball writers or the committee to get Major League Baseball players into the Hall of Fame?
Why would you say they're bad or as bad?
So why I bring it up is, I do look into this every year. It's fun for me to look and see who gets how many votes and all this. If you don't know, again, you can be on the ballot after you've played for 10 years max. To stay on the ballot, you got to get 5% of the vote. And then to get in the Hall of Fame, you have to get 75% of the vote. So as we know, there's the whole steroid users, right? Or alleged steroid users that are not in the Hall of Fame, right? We can talk about Bonds, Clemens. They, we think they use, we don't know for sure. We have, there's all kinds of smoking guns, smoking needles, as you but, and then there's still guys on the ballot to this day right now, and they're getting votes. And I've always been one that I think they all should be in. But I'm also that guy that says, yeah, if you failed a test after they implemented drug testing, then I don't know if I can help you out. Because let's face it, if there was a period they didn't care, They love the home. They love the long ball. So, but what brings it up is again this year recently, and I'll get into the baseball writers, their voting at the moment, and how I don't agree with the trend it looks like. But again, then there is the contemporary baseball era committee I mentioned. So they vote guys who don't get in on the regular process later can get voted in by this committee. And the committee is 16 people. They're former, some players, coaches, different people who were in baseball. There's 16. You have to get 12 votes to get voted into the Hall of Fame by this committee. Each member, I believe, get up to 3 votes. Okay? And there's roughly 6, 7, 8 guys, up for possible selection. So just this past week on December 7th, Jeff Kent got voted in with 14 votes. And I'm all for it. I thought Jeff Kent should have got in on the regular process, right? Solid numbers, most home runs ever by a second baseman. He's got an MVP, had some 5 All-Stars, some silver sluggers. Not like most people would look at it and not say the greatest numbers, but again, I thought compared to some people they've let in, I'm like, why not? Let him in. So he gets in, which I'm cool with. Bonds, Clemens, Fernando Valenzuela, they did not get in. I don't think Valenzuela should have got in anyways, but Bonds and Clemens, of course, they didn't get in. Though they would still be eligible. They didn't get 5 votes, so you had to get 5 on this committee to be on the ballot next year. So regardless of that, the other votes bothered me. Also on this ballot this year was Dale Murphy and Don Mattingly. So if you know anything about baseball, you know those 2 names. They were 2 of the top players of the 1980s, early 90s. Dale Murphy won back-to-back MVPs. Again, his numbers don't blow you away. He didn't hit all the milestones that you normally do in baseball, the 3,000 hits, 500 home runs, bat around 300. But he also played in the dead ball era. And the same for Mattingly. And they didn't use steroids. Mattingly has an MVP. He's an all-time Yankee. So they got the All-Stars. They've got Gold Gloves. They've got, again, MVPs. Everything you think you would get to get in the Hall of Fame. So somehow they didn't get voted in on the regular process. Here they are again. Murphy's been on this a couple times on this new era committee. They got 6 votes apiece. Now my issue comes with who got the second most votes on this year was Carlos Delgado. He got 9 votes. Carlos Delgado was 3 votes away from getting in the Hall of Fame over Don Mattingly and Dale Murphy. That's where my problem comes this year because Carlos Delgado batted .280, not bad. He got a little over 2,000 hits, not bad, but that's 1,000 from 3,000. 473 home runs, solid, almost 500. A little over 1,500 RBIs, that's solid, pretty good numbers. 483 doubles, again solid. 1,100 walks, solid. They go by WAR now, wins above replacement. He had a 44, that's middle of the road. He was a 2-time All-Star and no MVPs, no Gold Gloves, and he had 3 Silver Sluggers. So again, I know I'm rattling off numbers, but again, when you hear that, you're like, oh, okay, he was a solid player, but I mean, no MVPs. He didn't dominate the game for a whole era like a Don Mattingly, a Dale Murphy. And just to rattle off those numbers again for everybody, for Dale Murphy and Don Mattingly. Don Mattingly batted .307 for his career. 2,153 hits, only 222 home runs, only 1,099 RBIs, but still 442 doubles. 588 walks, not bad again. 42 WAR. 6 All-Stars, 9 Gold Gloves, 3 Silver Sluggers, and an MVP. Dale Murphy, 265 average, 2,100 some hits. He had 398 home runs, 1,266 RBIs, 350 doubles, 986 walks, and a 46 WAR. With 7 All-Stars, 5 Gold Gloves, 4 Silver Sluggers, and 2 MVPs. So I'm not going to keep here rattling off numbers. My thing is, with this committee, with this vote here, is I don't know how Carlos Delgado got more votes than Mattingly and Murphy and was so close to getting in before these two legends. And Mattingly and Murphy are legends. Let's not get it twisted.
Yeah, they are. They are.
So that's my first beef. And I don't know if you want to respond, and I go to the next to just the baseball writers and the direction and the stupidity they do sometimes.
Well, no, and like the only thing is like when we were talking about the college football selection committee, to me, the incentive that they had to have kind of questionable rankings made sense because they had a TV show around the reveal of who is put in what slot and all that. This is just where I'm confused because I don't understand what the benefit is. I don't know what the criteria is, and the expectation is that people who are professional baseball writers understand the game, understand the players, understand the stats, and they have kind of the highest level of knowledge of making the decision. So it's not just about having a disagreement with what it is that they come up with. So it's but I don't understand what the so let me put it like this. So let's just say there's a writer who's from Chicago, based in Chicago, and covers the Cubs, and then he just happens to vote for a Chicago Cubs player, whether historic or current, to constantly make it to the Hall of Fame. That makes sense, and you're going to get that type of regional bias. But other than that, I don't understand what the benefit is of having controversial selections. I guess I don't see the benefit for the committee and the members of the committee themselves.
Yeah, I don't either. It's one of the hardest things to try to figure out. I try to look at it again objectively. I'm obviously a Braves fan, so like this year I'm really rooting for Andrew Jones. And he's on his 9th year, and it's just like, can we just get him in? Like, you're letting, other people are in who didn't do, was not a great as player as him. So obviously, and there's always, like you said, it's just some head scratchers. And I'll give you some examples, though. And again, this Carlos Delgado, again, you're not, like, we've agreed, you're not the biggest baseball, fan, whatever, right? Knowing the history and all that. Like, did you know who Carlos Delgado was?
What, as a player?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know who he was, but like you said, if you're going like biased, and this group of these 16 members of this committee, you would think if they're biased, then they would go with the two players like Dale Murphy and Don Mattingly. One played for the New York Yankees, and the other played for the Atlanta Braves. Carlos Delgado was mainly a Toronto Blue Jay, and then he had a stint with the Marlins and the Mets. So in history, Delgado is known as a Toronto Blue Jay. He is their all-time home run leader. But so we get to the Baseball Writers Association of America. And right now, like I said, 5% of the votes in for this vote right now that's going on. And they turn in their ballots, and there's a guy, he tracks all the ballots. They turn in their ballots, and he tracks them. So that it's like a whole spreadsheet. I follow it up until the time they announce it. And it's pretty accurate. He normally doesn't get the end of it, the end votes, the last week or couple day votes. But it's pretty accurate. So my issue at the moment is, again, I brought up steroid users. So this year, in my opinion, there's a lot of guys who should be in the Hall of Fame. And, there are so there's, again, writers get 10 votes in the normal selection of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. They don't have to use all 10 votes, but they get 10 votes. So you brought up the fact of biased, right, from these guys locally. And one of that happened. Some of these guys don't even put their name on their ballot. They turn them in and they're anonymous. So here's where, as a fan, you get kind of upset. One anonymous vote already has been turned in. The guy voted for one person, or the voter voted for one person, and he voted for David Wright. David Wright, solid baseball player, New York Met. I don't know if I agree that he's a Hall of Famer. He's definitely borderline. He was really good. But that just shows you, right? Then there's one guy on here. He voted for nobody. He turned in a ballot blank. So he thought that nobody this year was worthy of a vote. Okay. So again, my opinion for sure this year, Carlos Beltran, Andrew Jones should get in. That's just my opinion. We can get into, I'm not going to get into the weeds of these stats. There's other guys, like I said, I always say there's guys that are in that have just as good numbers as guys who have already been put in. Guys like if you watch, again, if you're going by numbers, and again, that's what you're saying, like they should be going off numbers, and then like I said, awards, things like that, all-stars, things like that should matter. I think postseason should matter too if you've got the other numbers to back it up. Again, if you're World Series champion, MVP, now you got Championship Series MVPs, I think those things should matter too. So I mentioned Bonds not in the Hall of Fame, Clemens not in the Hall of Fame. If there's certain guy, Kurt Schilling's not in the Hall of Fame, and he didn't even do steroids. They just don't like his personal life. So Andy Pettitte is getting a lot of votes already, and I've seen a lot of writers, a lot of analysts talk about that Andy Pettitte should be in the Hall of Fame. He would be one of the former players on the MLB network. Andy Pettitte failed a drug test. Andy Pettitte had to do a news conference and apologize for taking drugs.
Yeah, I do remember that.
But there's a big campaign for him because you know why? Because he's a nice guy, right? Bonds and Clemens aren't nice guys. So, Gary Sheffield, not in the Hall of Fame. They don't want to vote him in because he might have been connected to some steroids. Andy Pettitte, after drug testing was implemented, failed a drug test. But somehow he's getting this, all of a sudden, this campaign to get him in. So I could go through the names again. Manny Ramirez is on this ballot still. Alex Rodriguez, all failed after the fact. So So all this to say, I don't know which. I think the baseball one bothers me more because I feel like the writers think they have this holier than thou power to pick and choose, like you said, with the steroids. It's well, he did steroids and we don't like him, so we're not going to vote him in. But we're going to give this guy a lot of votes because we like him. And some of these votes could be guys who also voted for Bonds and Clemens, etc. And I get it, like to be in the Hall of Fame, like the whole Pete Rose thing we talked about before. You don't want to cheat the game. You don't want to. There's a certain stain you don't want a Hall of Famer to have, but they're very inconsistent because I think there's guys obviously that are in that there's some question marks if they use steroids or not, and then you get into the talent situation, like you said. These writers are voting for one person and they're anonymous, and it's a guy who really is not even the best player on the ballot and does not have the numbers to back it up. and then you have to, like you said, then you're changing the numbers that are actually, like, well, he didn't get, 3,000 hits, but he had 20-some hundred hits. And that's pretty good because he didn't use steroids. Or the same with the 500 home runs or the 300 wins for pitchers, because now, pitchers, it's hard. It's going to be hard to win 300 games because, they might pitch 5 innings. They might not pitch, the way they use pitchers now, they might not get to 300 wins or, 3,000 strikeouts or whatever the case may be. So I think it just bothers me more. So I know I'm on a rant and I've been yelling off numbers and stats and players' names, but the Hall of Fame voting is not going anywhere, obviously. They're always going to let the baseball writers do it, and then if they don't get in, then the contemporary committee then get a chance to vote guys in. And it's just like I said, when you heard what I rattled off, the stats, and then you're like, how did that guy get more votes than that guy? And then it's the, also it's the I voted for him last year, but this year I'm not voting for him. That blows my mind. Either they're a Hall of Famer or they're not, in my mind, right? Because you could say, well, they're not a first ballot Hall of Famer. But again, if they don't get 5%, then they drop off the ballot. So to me, if I always look at it, I like to have fun with it and say, okay, if I had 10 votes, would I vote for 10 people or would I vote, how would I do it? But some are just no-brainers. And like you said, though, as long as they're coming from a city, they're biased to their region, to their team. But, again, I don't think you should have a vote if you're doing stuff like that. I think you should be honest about the game of baseball and honest about the Hall of Fame vote. And I just don't think these guys are being honest. I think the college football playoff committee, I think, are being more honest than these baseball writers.
Really?
I do. I really do. Now, do they have agendas? Like I heard them say Notre Dame got punished this year because they're not in a conference. They're like, we'll show them. We don't know if that's true. I think there's definitely bias, like you said, Alabama. But at the same time, the way they've got the conferences, and it's like, like JMU, Tulane. I'm like, do we really think they're? Go look at their schedule. They could really be good football teams. They might win a game. I don't know. But each time this season they played a top program of another conference, they got beat. The JMU lost to Louisville by 2 touchdowns, and Tulane lost to Mississippi by 25, 3-4 touchdowns. So that's what I'm saying. I think they're trying. I just think their criteria, they're just kind of like, they're going back and forth, and there's this algorithm in their brain, and they're like you said, they're saying, well, head to head, and they played in the championship, and they didn't, and well, they did this and they did that, and then there's like this, I think they coin flip. And then again, Alabama is rewarded for playing in the SEC. They play a tougher schedule. But then, like you said, the strength of schedule changes throughout the season. You may think this school's good at the beginning of the year, and they may not end up being good. So I think there's a lot that goes into the college one. And I just think the baseball writers try to act holier than thou. And they just, like you said, for spite, they won't vote for a guy because they're like, well, he wasn't nice to me, so I'm not going to vote for him. Well, that's got nothing to do with how he played on the field.
Yeah, and that's been around for years. Where, I'm just to kind of put a bow on this, and it made me laugh. It made me laugh hard. I think at this point in our lives, kind of the older curmudgeon grandpas in sports media is, Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon.
Yeah.
Did you hear what Michael Wilbon said about how he felt about Notre Dame?
No.
He said, I hate Notre Dame. I've always hated Notre Dame. And the thing that was flooring about it was clear that was how he'd always felt. And if you were to go back for years, you could probably find things where he'd criticize Notre Dame, but the door had opened up with an opportunity for him to kind of say everything that everybody else was saying about Notre Dame, Where
Right.
before he had to be objective, serious journalism guy, and he couldn't say those types of things. But of course, we know what year it is. We're in the era of Colin Cowherd and screaming A. Smith, and you can just say whatever now. Like no one's gonna hold it against you. So for Wilbon to kind of pile on and say, yeah, I've always hated Notre Dame. And now that just kind of shows you the bias that if someone like him, who is, I mean, incredibly well respected, like very well respected, and you would hope that he would have the objectivity to not be able to hold how he feels about a team against them. But let's just say he's one of those people that's on the committee. Yeah. Let's say he just happens to be, if Michael Wilbon, somebody who's been on TV for 25 years doing PTI, the lead into SportsCenter, and he comes out and says that, it's just an interesting perspective to hear him come out and say that, toward the end of his career on television, and just make it clear, like, yeah, I have always hated Notre Dame. I'm pretty sure there's someone in that room that may feel the same way. And maybe it's not toward Notre Dame. Maybe it's toward some other team that they have some, that their alma mater, plays them every year. So it's like, yeah, I don't like this, or my son goes to this school, so now I hate that school. It's all ridiculous. And when you have these people involved, you're going to have the feelings and the emotions and the biases that come with them. And it's an imperfect system, but I think that it's working specifically how it's designed to work, is to be imperfect so that way you can manipulate situations and get it to be what you want it to be.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I'm not lying. Wilbon did say that.
Yeah.
The audio is actually kind of funny too.
No, I believe it. All right, so that is another episode of Fanatically Speaking. I am Kent, the co-host and promoter.
I am Logoff, the Logoff legend, the hater of social media. I am the co-host and producer of the show. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Fanatically Speaking. We are all over all the social media platforms, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Kent, where can they listen? Can't they listen to us on every podcast platform?
Every major podcast platform. There may be something that we don't know about, but no one's listening on those. It's the main ones, mostly everyone listens on Apple, Spotify, Amazon. I think there's iHeartRadio. There's other ones. But, yeah, anywhere there's podcasts, we are there. We are out there. Go listen to us. Again, interact with us on social media. And then share, like, follow, download, whatever. Get it out there. Tell someone. Tell a friend. Phone a friend. And, just keep us going, man. Like I said, listen to us. And then, share. Get it out there.
Share, like, post, review, follow. Yeah.
All right. That's all I got.
Yep. Same thing,
It's a
man.
wrap.